He was able to share story after story of how the mind and heart navigate the body. And the body will never follow where the mind and heart is not willing to lead. So that means that the mind and heart need to be there first.
Leadership is everywhere. In our work, in our family, in our community. We see leaders by their actions. We know their legacy. This podcast is about leaders, people just like you, doing amazing things every day. I hope these stories inspire you, they motivate you, and they fuel your leadership legacy. My name is Vicki Guy. Welcome to Ignite.
Hi, and welcome to Ignite. What does it take to handle trauma? Many among us have been faced with some kind of unexpected circumstance that has challenged us either physically, mentally, emotionally, or even spiritually. Perhaps you've been laid off from your job. Perhaps you were the victim of a crime. Or perhaps you've had some other personal misfortune. When circumstances turn unexpectedly, do you feel prepared, ready, or even whole? Our guest today, David Lau, is a counterterrorism and security professional who trains leaders on how to prepare for the unexpected. As a guest speaker at the upcoming University of Florida Inspiring Women's Leaders Conference, March 8th through the 10th in Gainesville, Florida, David will address the importance of shaping leaders as the whole self, emphasizing how mindset and heart set are just as important as skill set. In just a moment, we'll be back to talk to David Lau.
Are you a career changer or a budding tech pro who's looking to start their career in IT? I'm Wes Bryan, and along with my fellow IT Pro TV edutainer Cherokee Boos, we've just shot a new show just for you. Each week, we'll dive into topics to help you launch your career in tech. Watch how to get started in IT on YouTube now. Just head to youtube.com/IT Pro TV to watch, and look for new episodes every Saturday at 9 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time.
Hi, and welcome back to Ignite. Today we are joined with David Lau. He is a counterterrorism and security professional. David, thank you for being with us on Ignite. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. We are excited to have you here very soon, visiting the University of Florida Inspiring Women's Leaders Conference on March 8th. And today you're going to join us to talk a little bit about some of the concepts that are near and dear to your heart that you're also going to be able to share with these aspiring women who these aspiring leaders who specifically are women, right? So
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and what you spend most of your time working through and working with that you're going to be talking to us at the conference about.
Well, what I love to do, and it sounds esoteric and it's on the surface of it, so I'll break it down, but I like to try to add value to people's leadership journey. And some of the favorite ways I like to do that are by talking about and showing examples of how to live a life of wellness and resilience. Wellness begets resilience. So leadership, those are leadership requirements, and leadership in my mind, it's an action. It's not a position. The concepts of leadership are universal. They're not confined to a profession or to a rank. It's something that every successful organization expects people to lead from where they are, and that's the message that I like to try to carry. And I try to tie in some personal stories and some examples from history, just to get across the point that leadership doesn't come from having a rank or an official position assigned. It's something that you choose to do.
Mm. Yeah. Well, it's interesting as we're talking, the thing that you stand for and the whole point about leading from where you are, that's really the essence of this podcast. So the Ignite podcast really is dedicated to showcasing people that are leaders in their own space, leading where they are. So David, share with us a little bit about your space.
Okay.
What the topic is fascinating, and I know that people that are listening to this and that will hopefully see you in March and perhaps in other spaces as well, they probably get a really interesting message on how to do that. Give us an example of what you do or have done in your past to help others lead where they are.
So for my day job, I'm the program coordinator and I'm a senior instructor for a large government organization. And some of the programs that I'm over are, for example, we call one Leading Through Understanding Human Behavior. Mm-hmm. And so this is about, if you want to lead others, first and foremost, you have to be able to lead yourself. And to lead yourself, you have to be able to know yourself. And so we take people through the concepts of behavioral styles, right? There's many behavioral styles out there, models. I like the DISC model. So we take people through the DISC model of behavior, which is, some people are natural introverts, some people are natural extroverts. And the more that we study it, the more that we know that, you truly are wired a certain way. Depending on what studies you read, 50 to 60% of your behavioral style is genetically predetermined. Your baseline level of happiness is up to 60% genetically predetermined. So one of the best lessons you can ever teach someone is to, number one, understand yourself, know how you communicate, know how you receive communications, know how others receive communications, right? Because everybody's familiar with the golden rule. We're taught that as children. And the golden rule is, treat others as how you want to be treated, which is a great rule, but understanding that we're all different, Vicky, I'm a unique person, you're a unique person. So me, with all the best of intentions, if I'm treating you how I want to be treated, it could be entirely possible that that is not how you want to be treated. Mm-hmm. But the only way I'm going to know that is if I take time to be mindful and I get to know you, right? And that's my best chance of influencing you. And leadership is about influencing others because you're leading people, not things or processes. Mm. You're trying to accomplish missions done through other people. So that's one of the things that I really like to teach. Motivators, why people do what they do. You and I could have the same goal, but we're trying to accomplish that goal for entirely different reasons. And although behaviors are observable, to get to know why somebody does what they do, you have to take time to get to know them. And that ties right back into behavioral styles, because the more different someone's behavioral style is from your own, the harder you're going to have to work to try to bridge that gap to get to truly know that person if you want to know why they do what they do, which is totally important. I mean, you can see the what. I can observe why you're doing what you do. I mean, I can observe what you're doing, what you do, but it takes time for me to get to know why you're doing what you do.
It's interesting. So I spend a lot of time myself working with the DISC profile with some of my clients. And so you said so much there that we can really kind of dig into. And, one of the things is that if we can spend a little time knowing who we are and knowing how we're wired, then we have a better chance of influencing others. And you talked about wellness moving into resilience. Is this part of what you mean by being partially being well and then being able to be resilient? Is that part of that link, or is it something different?
No, it's part of it. So I think that wellness begets resilience, right? To be well, what is it to be well? If you ask a room full of people, what is wellness, you'll get many different definitions. Some people will say, wellness is eating right. It's taking care of yourself. And that's true. Mm-hmm. Wellness is also physical wellness is also, it's also emotional, mental wellness, and spiritual wellness, because we are synergistic beings. And so the four elements of what makes the whole person, they're the physical self, the mental self, the emotional self, and the spiritual self. And quite often we're very comfortable talking about wellness in the physical context, but the conversation, especially when it comes to leadership, isn't had often enough of the emotional, mental, and spiritual self. And those are facets that every human being has, and you deny them at your own peril. And that goes into leadership, because organizations and families, they need their leaders most, not in times of calm seas, but when things are rough, when the waves are rough, when things get rugged, that's when organizations need their leaders the most. And if wellness hasn't been tended to up until that point, then in those times of crisis, the leader's already going to be exhausted.
So I have to
mentally, spiritually, emotionally.
Yeah, I want to interrupt you for just a moment because I saw a quote that I think came from you that I want to read, and I want to make sure that I'm tracking with you on terms of if this is what you're speaking about. You talked about you won't know what you're made of until you are faced with the worst day of your life, and you said we know this to be false.
That's right. So that speaks to resilience.
Okay, but so I've heard that a lot. People say, well, when really bad things happen, we're going to find out what people are made of. But you're saying that that's not the case. Help us understand why that may not be the case.
So what does it take to handle trauma? And what does it take to handle storms, right? Storms of life will visit you personally. They will visit you professionally. They will affect you exactly the same, right? One of the biggest training scars, one of the biggest untruths that we've been told is you have to leave home at home and you have to leave work at work. And we understand what they mean. You get paid to do a job. We need you to show up no matter what's going on, be professional and get the job done. But truly, you cannot leave home at home and you cannot leave work at work because there is only one you, right? There's only one you, and your body's a pharmacy. Your body produces hormones, which are very powerful, non-water soluble drugs based upon how you perceive an event. So if you are in a toxic environment, say you're in a toxic environment at work and you get ready to leave work for the day and something happens, you have a run-in with the boss or with a colleague, and then your amygdala triggers fight or flight. So your body gets flooded with cortisol, adrenaline. It's going to take 12 hours for those hormones to, course their way through your system. There's no way that is not going to affect your home life, right? I mean, the minute you walk in the door, if you're lucky enough to have somebody at the house waiting for you, as soon as you walk in, you don't have to say a word. They're going to look at you and think, ooh, something just went down at work. So, but that's an example of, trauma, storms, whether they visit you personally or professionally. Sometimes we see these storms on the horizon and we do everything that we can do to avoid them. Other times, due to your profession, you're the one, everyone's trying to flee the storm. You're the one going into the storm. Other times it just pops up and you never saw it coming. So we know that they're out there and we know that they're going to happen. And the idea that you have to wait for this trauma to strike until you find out what you're made of, I don't accept that, because I've been through some programs and I've had the real life experiences where I've seen, and this is an unscientific survey of one, where I've seen the effects of training and trying to prepare people to weather trauma, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and investing in them because you love them and you want them to come home whole, not just physically. You want them to come home whole mentally, emotionally, and spiritually as well. And I've seen what happens when you only train people in what I call the low-hanging fruit of just tool set and skill set, and then send them out with no investment in their mindset and heart set. And then trauma strikes. And, now they themselves don't know if they're going to make it through, because the brain is very powerful. And so when you are training for an unseen storm, and maybe you can predict what shape it's going to take, maybe you can't. What we do know, and the science of neuroplasticity backs this up, that through training and through thought, and there's books that we can read, that you can front load your brain for a trauma. Like you can almost pre-trauma proof your brain. It doesn't mean that you're going to make it through that event without a nick, by no means. But what it does mean is you've already programmed a template for success in your head, so that when that storm strikes, it's not new to your brain. Your brain's already been there. And if you've already visualized success and victory, then your brain knows a way through.
Yeah.
Because sometimes...
Yeah, it makes sense, everything that you're saying. And I don't know if I've ever really thought about, situations or, stress in that way, but it makes total sense. You mentioned that you had experienced or you've seen times when this has played out. Can you think of a situation that you've seen where either on one side, either someone did not train for it and it didn't go well, or they did train for it and the scars and the nicks were very minimal?
I can give you a personal example, but it's a heavy example. It's a heavy example, but it's real life, and real life is heavy. So the last, I'll call real thing, the last real thing that I did with the military is I went to Afghanistan as part of an advisory unit. And it's, in my mind, it's the best way to go to another nation and try to help. You go through a very extensive training program. The organization that sent me was very unorthodox, and their outlook very unorthodox, and how they trained. And they didn't wait for a research or a survey, to come out. They just intrinsically knew what worked, and they cared about us enough to invest in us in that way. So in addition to training on, what I would call the hard skills or the tangible skills of everything that goes into going into a combat zone, we covered those backward and forwards. They also trained on the intangibles of mindset and heart set, and they would do some very unorthodox things. One of the things that they made us do is identify to each other and hold each other accountable your why or your purpose, and it was as simple as stand around and look, we're going to go to a place that, in order to complete this mission, that could mean that you must give your last full measure, and your family's never going to see you again, at least not in this lifetime. So you need to be crystal clear in your mind why you're willing to do this. Why did you volunteer to do this? And we would go around and identify to each other, look, no matter what happens, this is what I'm willing to go through anything to make it home to. This is what I'm willing to shoot, burn, stab, claw my way through to make it home to. And, we would have to get very raw, very emotional and tell each other. And I think that's something that everybody needs to do. You don't have to be in the warrior or guardian profession, because life is risk. I mean, every day that you leave your house, you take a risk. And that's identifying your why in the grand scheme of things. We spent time with former American prisoners of war that they brought in, to train with us, and men who had survived barbarous conditions, who were kept simply alive by their indomitable spirit and their heart. And, we were able to sit knee to knee with these men and, ask them, how'd you do it? Held by the North Koreans and Chinese for almost 3 years. And when they got you back, you were 120 pounds, which doesn't sound that bad, but the gentleman I'm talking about was 6'5". So that was the weight of his skeleton and his internal organs, and he was able to share story after story of how the mind and heart navigate the body. And the body will never follow where the mind and heart is not willing to lead. So that means that the mind and heart need to be there first, in thought, in principle. You have to try to foresee it and think through these processes. So my organization would do things like that for us. We go down range, we get set in country. And over time, we took on another organization that were conventionally trained. So they were just trained in the hard skills, how to do the job. They weren't invested in the intangibles, mindset, heart set, identifying your why, your purpose, working on mental resiliency, what we call OODA looping. It's a mental imagery game where you visualize success. And over the course of that deployment, unfortunately, we lost 3 of those brave Americans to conventional kinetic attacks, small arms fire, IEDs. But everyone's been back for a long time now. And this is what hurts. As of 9 months ago, they lost their 4th person to his own hand. So, and that pains me to say that. So now that organization has officially lost more people to their own hand than when we were in a situation where the Taliban and other units are trying to fight us day and night. That is the price. That's a extreme example. That's a heavy example of the price that can be paid when you do not invest in mental resilience and mindset and heart set. And, this is always an elephant in the room. I just read a stat yesterday that the second leading cause of death among people 17 to 25 is suicide. So this is not just a problem that affects the military. This is a problem that affects America. We become disconnected and we've lost our way. We've lost our purpose. And when you lose your purpose in life, you start to feel like what you do doesn't matter. So that all, it's not a simple answer. It's very holistic, but that's when I think of an example of, does this work? Do you have to wait until you are in the worst day of your life to find out if you have what it takes? My answer to anybody who asks me that question is absolutely not. I've lived through it. I've seen an example of what happens when you have one group of people, group A, and they are invested in mindset, heart set. They're given a template of how to increase their resilience, and they're set into harm's way. And then you have group B, who, due to no fault of their own, they just, they were not invested in. And then they were expected, hey, that was the group. You know what? The only way to find out if you have what it takes is to be in there with it. And if that's your attitude towards training, then there's going to be a heavy price to be paid. Well, and I don't blame those men. Yeah. I blame the organization that sent them.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say, David, thank you for sharing all of that, because it was a heavy story. It is a heavy situation, but it's real, and it's what we're facing today. And so just sharing that with us here, I really appreciate that. And I think it also illustrates, the passion that you have for what you do and helping people be well and build resilience for any kind of trauma in their life. I mean, that's golden. That's good stuff. And I'm looking forward to hearing you speak on a bigger stage, live in person, to be able to hear more of those stories. For today, I'm wondering, without stealing any more thunder from any of your talks or what we might hear in the future, if somebody's listening to this podcast and they say, wow, that struck a chord with me. I see now the importance of training my what you talked about in your mind and your soul, not just your body, but making sure that everything is aligned. What advice would you give to somebody that isn't faced with going to war? Or, what is one piece of advice that you could give to somebody to help them find that alignment within themselves?
I think step one for everything is have an honest, meditative, deep, reflective conversation with yourself and ask you what's important to you. What is important to you? Because you don't have to go down range. You don't have to go into a war zone. But life is life. And in everyone's life, there will come a day when you don't feel like getting out of bed. There's going to come a day when something's going on at work and you go to leave the house and you put your hand on the doorknob and you go to twist the doorknob and you stop and you go like this. Oh, man, how much sick leave do I have? Do they really deserve me coming in today? Those days will come. And because this conference is a leadership workshop, what I want people to know is if you have your purpose or your why identified, then it's easy to overcome those days, because those days will come for everybody. And it's important to know, yes, what you do is important, but why? We have to have this identified because people need purpose. If people want to have vision, we expect our leaders to have vision. You can't have a vision unless you feel and in your heart of hearts understand your purpose and understand your value that you bring to your organization. And if you know that, then I don't feel like going in today. But in truth, all these things that are dissuading me from going in are probably personality driven. And that in no way takes away from the value that I bring to the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I need to go in.
Yeah. I mean, just really powerful stuff. And I'm a believer. I believe that that's super important. I'm not sure how many people do it very often, but I think the more often we could dedicate time to thinking about why we do what we do, what we stand for, I think the more resilient we can be overall. So David, thank you so much for joining us here on Ignite. I really appreciate you sharing some of your time, your experiences, and in just a moment, we'll be back with some final thoughts on Ignite.
An IT team that's upskilled and ready for any challenge. How do you get there? Join thousands of other IT leaders and let IT Pro TV be your resource. With more than 4,000 hours of IT training, IT Pro TV gives your team a resource to go to. The most popular vendors: CompTIA, Microsoft, Cisco, Linux, Apple, AWS, and more. The hottest tech, cloud, security, networking, and more. What's next for your organization? Whether it's an implementation, cloud migration, more workstation support, or new technology, you're covered. With IT Pro TV, you can rest easy. Your team will always be ready. It's binge-worthy learning for IT pros. Get a free trial for your team today. Visit www.itpro.tv/business.
Welcome back to Ignite. We hope that you enjoyed bits of wisdom from David, and we look forward to seeing you at the University of Florida Inspiring Women's Leaders Conference, March 8th through the 10th. Thanks for listening to Ignite. Please like us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and subscribe on YouTube or Apple Podcasts. From all of us here at Ignite, we'll see you next time.